The sea stink curled through the shutters like a cat. Ned Stark rose before the sun as he always had, though the city was never truly dark. Torches guttered along the walls of Maegor's Holdfast and oil lamps burned in the winding streets below, where sleeps were the province of those too poor to afford fear. He stood a long while at the window, watching a gray ripple run the length of the Blackwater. In the quiet, the Iron Throne hummed to him from across the castle like a hive he did not want to approach. Ash rested on the sill. Soot from 10,000 chimneys drifted down every night in King's Landing, as if the city could not keep from making a snow of its own filth. He rubbed a thumb across the gray grit and turned at the rap on the door. Varys entered without sound, his slippers making no more noise than a moth's wings. He bowed until his silk sleeves poured to the floor. "Lord Stark." "Robert?" Ned asked. There was a pressure across his chest each time a door opened now. "The king sleeps a sleep that is sadly short of waking," Varys said gently. "Maester Pycelle has given him milk of the poppy. A mercy." He lifted weightless hands. "But at this hour, mercy is much talked of and little given. The queen has set her men about the castle. Lannister colors everywhere one looks. The red of them rather ruins the dawn." Ned crossed the solar, stepped around a map littered with small iron stags and lions, and strapped Ice's smaller cousin to his hip, a shorter blade, meant for street work. He had not packed to bring a war south, but it had followed him through the Kingswood and into the streets like a stray. "I will see Robert soon," he said. "Before sunset." "Before sunset," Varys repeated, smoothing his hands together. "Before swords are drawn or after. There are other suns in this city. Some shine upon pearl and some upon dung." "Speak plain," Ned said. "The city watch," Varys said with a quick look to the shutter, as if he expected an ear in the wood. Janos Slynt is, how to put it, eager. The word carried a scent of the butcher's block. Eager for advancement, eager for coin. He has spoken oaths to many ears of late. Oaths are such fragile things, Lord Stark. Littlefinger told me their loyalty is bought with gold and kept with it. Lord Baelish is a man who knows the price of things, Varys said. He does not always know their worth. Ned's jaw set. He remembered the red smear that had been Jory's mouth, the dying light in his captain's eyes after Jaime's ambush, and he felt the slow burn of shame for trusting so many smooth words. The city's heat lay upon him like a fever. "What do you counsel?" "The city watch are 2,000 men who sleep with pikes against their bed frames," said Varys softly. "They look to their captain because he makes them feel tall. If he measures his height in coin, then there are other measures by which they might be taught to stand. Coin does help, but so do the small captains, the bald sergeants who hold their lines, the ones with wives and sons and little houses in Flea Bottom they fear to lose. You're asking me to bribe Slynt and to collar his officers with duty. I am asking you to choose the safety of the realm over your northerly scruples," Varys said. "Forgive me. Honor is a fine iron to hang a sword upon, but even iron bends if the fire is hot enough. The fire is very hot, Lord Stark." Ned thought of Robert as he'd first known him, a boy with a storm in him, eyes clear, voice ringing. He thought of the letter on the table with the royal seal, naming him protector. He thought of his girls. "How much?" he asked. Varys did not blink. "Enough to feed 1,000 bellies for a winter. Enough to make the watch think itself wed to you. More than the queen has thought to offer, and now. The treasury is very much a theory," Varys said, regretful. "But theories can be made flesh by men who bend them. Lord Baelish moves in coin the way fish move in water. Ask him for a purse large and fast enough to drown a city, and he will smile and offer you a river. And then slit my throat while I drink," Ned said. "He is not my friend." "No," Varys agreed, "but he is the drawer of purses. If he gives you an empty one, you will know." Ned went back to the window. Dawn made a thin iron horizon. "I will see Baelish," he decided, "and then I will see Slynt." Varys' eyes grew distant, pleased or troubled. Ned could never say which. "I will arrange a quiet room and a useful lantern," he murmured. Littlefinger smiled as if the world were a joke he had told. He smiled across his table, a polished wood constellation of figures and ledgers and small blades used to cut seals. 2,000 gold dragons, he said, as if naming a woman he had tired of. It can be found. When? Ned asked. Before a cock can crow thrice, Littlefinger said, rolling a coin across his knuckles and letting it vanish. The cocks in this city are most industrious. Your jesting ill becomes the hour, Ned said. My jests ill become most hours, Littlefinger replied with a melancholy sigh. Do not frown so, my lord. I am only a simple mathematician. 2,000 for the watch, a few hundred into hands that make the watch move, and a little bit into pockets that need to feel heavy in case their owners begin to wonder if the wind is shifting. This is not a purchase. This is a weather vane. Point it at the north, and the wind will blow that way, so long as the vane remains oiled. You will provide it, Ned said. Littlefinger tapped his lip with the coin as if in thought, though Ned suspected he had finished thinking long before they met. Provide is an honest verb. Yes, the money will be where you want it. But say the words you mean. I will pay the city watch, Ned said, the words tasting like melted ice. And I will expect them to keep order when the Queen's men try to prevent Robert's will from being read. Littlefinger did not stop smiling, but it altered. It is the iron of you under the wool. Most men would say when Cersei tries, you say when the Queen's men try. A subtle difference that keeps blades from being drawn too soon. Very well. Where shall I send the purses? To the watch barracks, Ned said. To the sergeants. To the paymaster. To Slint's own house. And to the gutters, Littlefinger said, amused. I like you better when you're wicked, Lord Stark. It makes you look like us. I am not like you, Ned said. Do this, and do it fast. As you wish, Littlefinger said, with a bow and a flourish as if they had just agreed upon the menu of a supper. Oh, one more thing. Money is the easier half. The harder half is a person. Which person? Ser Jacelyn Bywater, Littlefinger said lazily. A watchman. An honest one, which is to say troublesome. He's a bald fellow with a black iron hand. Certain men mock him for it, which means he commands their envy. I have seen how the alley bends around him. If Slint is a bag of grain, this Bywater is the nail you drive through it to hold it closed. One may be enough. Both together, better. I will find him, Ned said. The meeting with Janos Slint was in a room that had once stored lamp oil and dried fish. What remained was the smell. Slint came armored in his strut. He was shorter than he pretended, with a chest like a slab of meat and a mouth made for spitting. He bowed in the general direction of Ned's boots and then spent a full minute speaking to the purses on the table as if they were old friends. 2,000, Slint said, weighing one. He made a show of pinching a coin, biting it, and smiling at the mark his tooth left. Fine gold, Lannister bright. It will not wear red once it's in your chest, Ned said. It will wear the city's black. Aye, Slint said. The purse disappeared in his hands like bread into a furnace. The men will like this. Prices are not what they were. Strange how a city grows dearer under a rich king. Robert is not dead, Ned said, the correction habit, the hope heroic only because it had no army. Hear me, Lord Commander. He made himself say the title. This coin is not for Janos Slint. It is for the safety of the city. Your oath is to the king and to keep the king's peace, Slint finished, eyeing him with frank insolence. I remember words, Lord Stark. I didn't wear my first sword as a bauble. Then hold to them when I read a paper with the king's own seal, Ned said. If the queen's men draw steel, put them on their knees. If any man cries for blood, give him a gag, not a head. You will keep your men in line. You will not let them turn butcher. You will keep the children safe. If you do this, there will be more gold. If you do not, I will put you in the black for the rest of your short life and name Bywater in your place. Slint's eyes flicked. The black iron hand bored into men, it seemed. Bywater will do as he's told, Slint said. He's a hard man but not clever. You need clever in this city. I need men who know the difference between clever and sly, Ned said. You will do as you're told, Lord Commander. Keep order. Obey the protector of the realm. Slint hesitated. Ned heard the coin whispering slickly as if the leather purses were snakes in straw. Slint spat onto an old fish stain on the floor and offered Ned a shallow nod. You say it plain like a cold wind. The watch will be yours when you need them. We don't like lions in our streets. They piss on the same walls we do, but think their piss smells sweeter. Ned left him and went to find Jacelyn Bywater. He found him in the yard behind a barracks off the Street of Steel, drilling a knot of watchmen with short spears until their arms shook with fatigue. Bywater was as Baelish had said, bare-pated, a face carved in stern lines, the black iron hand strapped to his left wrist where a real one might have been. It clicked softly as he picked up a spear to demonstrate a thrust. When Bywater noticed Ned, he planted the spear but hard, sent his men pacing, and came to him with a bow that did not bend his backbone. Lord Stark, you know me. I know men I might have to die for, Bywater said. Or with. You have had trouble with Slint. I've had trouble with the sort of men who float to the top of a fat city, Bywater said. Slint's the froth. He keeps the gutters clean and leaves the thieves he knows where they are so he can find them when he needs them. It's an art, but it's not honor. Ned looked the man in the eye. There was iron there the city had not rusted. There will be gold for your men today. I expect you to set your lines in the throne room when I call, and to keep them. If Slint wavers, the watch obeys me and you. Bywater's mouth twitched. A chain should be hammered with 2 hammers, my father said. I will keep men in hand. Ned held his gaze. Do not take coin from any man with a lion badge. I don't take coin, Bywater said. I take orders. Give them clean. Ned slept, if he slept at all, with the weight of the city on his ribs. Twice he woke with his hand on the short sword and found only old ash under his fingers. At dawn, Tomard brought him bread and cheese and a steaming cup that smelled faintly of tar and had somehow been called tea. Girls? Ned asked. Safe, Lord, Tomard said. The little one dances before breakfast. Gods help whoever gets in her way. The elder's been writing. Sansa likes to hold ink as if it were a bird, Ned said, and the memory made him ache. Keep them close. In the afternoon he went to Robert. The king's bed smelled of tallow and wine. Robert's face had become a stranger's. Slack and gray where it had been flushed and full, a melt of a life melting. His mouth was a red hole in a beard gone to neglect. Pycelle bent over him with a bottle and a string of bullshit as heavy as his chain. Milk of the poppy, the old man crooned, barely glancing at Ned as if he were a minor courtier. His grace is much eased. Edr. Eames of young days. Youth. A crown that every man wears once. Robert stirred, made a sound that might have been Ned's name or wine. Ned stood beside the bed and felt the ache of old laughter in his bones. I have your letter, he said to a man who could not hear him. He looked at Cersei watching from the far side of the room, her mouth a thin blade, her eyes measuring him like a seamstress cutting cloth. Joffrey lounged against a pillar with a sneer he had learned early. Tommen's round face was frightened. Myrcella's hands clutched a ribbon. She had twisted it so tight it would not untangle. Sandor Clegane stood behind them, impassive, a mountain of scars and silence. A pair of white cloaks flanked the door. Leave us, Ned said to the queen. I would say farewell to my king in private. Your king lies dying. He does not need your goodbyes, Cersei said with a small smile. He needs his family. He needs men who will not drag his oath through piss when he is too weak to speak, Ned said quietly. Go, your grace, or stay and listen to me tell your son why he is not his father's heir. Her eyes flashed and went very still. You would speak treason in the king's own bedchamber, she said. You must be very sure of yourself, or very stupid. I am sure of the truth, Ned said, and drew the folded parchment from his sleeve. And of the seal. Robert named me protector of the realm until his heir comes of age. You will honor that, or you will be removed from court until the matter is settled. She laughed then, genuinely. "You," she said, and laughed again and turned to go. "Come, Joff, Tommen, Myrcella, Ser Marin, Ser Boros, keep the hand from touching what is not his. I would not have his northern frost foul our air." "Your Grace," Ned said to her, retreating back. "When you play, remember the pieces bleed." But she did not turn. By the time the sun stabbed its first knife into the city's haze, Ned stood at the base of the Iron Throne. The blades reached up in a malignant garden, all iron thorns and proud steel leaves grown from the enemies of a long-dead king. The hall smelled of rust and wax. The small folk who had crept in with the dawn were kept some distance back by Pike's gold cloaks stood in 2 lines, their armor recently polished, their faces pinched with attention. Slint, a bright sash across his belly, was a squat pillar at their head. Bywater stood a pace behind, a shadow with an iron hand that caught the light like a black star. Ned's own men arrayed themselves near the foot of the dais. Varys stood with the small council, his hands folded like a prayer. Littlefinger leaned whispering in the ear of a courtier and smiled when he saw Ned's eye. Pycelle clutched his chain. The Hound waited with the princes and princess, Cersei beside them in a green gown dark as serpent grass. Robert was not there. The throne looked larger without him, hungrier. Ned held aloft the sealed parchment. "By the king's own hand," he said, and his voice filled the hall in a way that startled even him. "Until his heir comes of age, I am named protector of the realm. The small council will acknowledge this. The city watch will keep the peace. No one will draw blade in this hall today." Those are the king's words. Cersei, smiling with all the warmth of an icicle in a summer wine, stepped forward. "Your paper is very pretty, Lord Stark. Is this the one he made you write? With his wine-sour breath and your grave little pen? Tell me, did he even look at it? Or did he simply make a mark as if he were signing a hunting tally?" Ned felt the heat rise in him. He kept it bridled. "It is his seal. He gave me the hand's power while he lies abed. Your son will be cared for until the matter is decided." "My son," Cersei said, her voice ablaze. "Yes, say the words. They will cut your tongue for you soon enough." She turned then to the watch, and in that turn Ned saw all her cards face up. "Lord Commander Slint," she said, each word honeyed and edged. "You and your men are sworn to the crown." "We are sworn," Slint said. His eyes slid past her to the purses he had buried. "The crown," she said, her voice carrying. "Not to a northern usurper with a paper. Seize him, kill his men. I will have his head on a spear before." "Hold," Ned said, quiet as a winter field, and looked at Slint, not at her. The hall hung in a breath. Slint's tongue touched his lips. He raised his hand. It went up, flat, and then turned, palm open to Ned in the old soldier's sign of deference. "By order of the Lord Protector," Slint said, with a small bow that had no grace in it, only calculation. "The watch keeps the peace." A murmur rippled up and died like a wave against stone. Cersei's smile froze. "What?" Slint's face grew heavier. "You heard me, your grace." He swallowed and squared himself. His eyes were calculated pits. "The watch doesn't shed blood in the throne room the day the king lies dying." The Hound shifted his weight, amused. The white cloak stiffened. Pycelle made a small choking noise, as if he had swallowed a hair. Littlefinger's smile did not change, but something in his gaze dropped as if a coin had fallen into a deeper well. Ned let out a breath he had been holding since morning. He nodded to Bywater. "Ser Jacelyn, your men will remove the queen and her children to Maegor's Holdfast. They will be treated as befits their station. They will be guarded and not permitted to leave. No swords will be drawn unless the crown is threatened." Bywater's iron hand clicked around the shaft of his spear. "As you say, my lord," he said, and turned to bark orders. Cersei's eyes went very pale. She looked like a cat at bay, every muscle wanting to spring. "You dare," she whispered. "You dead man's virtue, you dare." Ned stepped closer to her than propriety allowed. He could smell ash and some keen perfume that reminded him of crushed roses. "I dare to keep the city from drowning in blood," he said. "I dare to keep your children safe. I dare to obey the king I served and the truth I have learned. Do not fight me here, Cersei. Not here. Not today. Today?" she said softly. "Every day is mine." She glanced at the hound. Sandor's mouth twisted in something like laughter. He leaned down to Joffrey's ear and said something, and the boy jerked as if stung. Joffrey took a half step, then stopped when he saw 20 pikes lower in a crisp hiss before him. Ned gave his next command like a man placing stones across a river. One wrong and the current would swallow the rest. "Lord Commander Slynt, take 3 files. Disarm any man in Lannister colors you see in the Red Keep. There will be no brawls. There will be no gashes to fester. Do you understand me?" Slynt nodded, sullen and calculating. "Aye." "And Slynt, if a hair on one of those children's heads, the watch keeps the peace," Slynt said. "I told you." They took Cersei and her brood between 2 shining walls of pikes. She did not struggle. That was her genius. She knew when the knife was at her throat and when words were the sharper weapon. She walked like a queen en route to her own coronation, chin high, with the hound laughing softly behind her. The white cloaks hesitated like a single man split across 7 bodies. Ser Meryn moved as if to step forward and then found Ned's gaze and thought better of it. Ser Boros looked to Pycelle, who spread his hands and found no answer among his bells. Ser Aerys looked pale and very young and kept his fingers tight upon his sword hilt as if it were a rosary. When they were gone, the hall exhaled. Ned turned to the small council. "We reconvene in the Tower of the Hand," he said. "Lord Baelish, you will see to the city gates. Varys, you will send trusted riders to Dragonstone and to Storm's End. Maester Pycelle, you will attend the king and send word of any change." He paused. "And bring me the Book of Lineages, the thick one. The truth is inked there in 1,000 hands." Pycelle simpered. "My good lord, these are matters of certain delicacy." "Bring the book, Maester," Ned said. Pycelle bowed with all the dignity a groveling man can muster. At once, the council shuffled like an old deck of cards. Littlefinger found Ned's side in the corridor, smiling and loose. "I admire a man who spends so lavishly," he murmured. "How did you like our butcher?" "Slynt will chew any bone, so long as it is large," Ned said. "And you fed him a haunch?" Littlefinger laughed. "Take care, my lord. Dogs remember who feeds them, but they remember a stronger smell as well. You must keep your larder open." "I will keep it closed to thieves," Ned said. Littlefinger lifted his hands as if to applaud. "I am wounded. You know what I am, and still you trust me." "I do not trust you," Ned said. "I pay you to do a thing. You've done it. You will do the rest because you cannot afford not to. That is all we are to one another, Baelish, and all we will be." "You wound me again," Littlefinger said and wandered away, whistling a maiden's tune. In the Tower of the Hand, with a dozen guards between him and any doorway, Ned received Ser Jacelyn Bywater. The watchman stood as if he had iron rods in his bones. "You kept your men clean," Ned said. "They kept themselves," Bywater said. "They like a line to hold." "Keep Slynt close," Ned said, and watched. Bywater looked without expression at Ned's close-cropped hair, his north in his face. "Watched by whom?" "By you," Ned said. Bywater inclined his head. "I will tie a string around him. If he chews through it, I'll tie another." Ned wanted to smile. He did not. "There will be more gold for the watch. Paid regular. No man goes hungry in your ranks." "That will have been the case since this morning," Bywater said dryly. "It will last until the next purse. We keep order when a ledger runs dry the same as when it runs wet. But men with full bellies hold lines better." "See to the gates," Ned said. "No man enters or leaves the city without the Protector's writ." He hesitated. "Not even the Queen's cousins." Bywater's iron hand clicked. "The Lannisters have cousins in every stone of this city, my lord. I will do what one man can." Varys brought him the book in a silk wrap to keep the dust off. The secrets of the old blood, It was called in one of its many names, though there were no secrets to a man who could read and think. Ned turned pages like winter leaves, crisp and brittle, until he found what he already knew. The Baratheon seed stamped black hair upon all it touched. In 400 unions, it had never yielded anything but dark. He looked from the book to Sansa's embroidery on the chair arm, a neat row of blue flowers she had begun the day they arrived. He thought of Joffrey's pale gold hair, of Tommen's soft curls, Myrcella's sunny mane. Truth, it did not comfort. He sent for Pycelle. He had the old man read the relevant torn pages with his thick old voice. He watched the way Pycelle's mouth pinched around certain names like a man biting into a lemon. He dismissed him and the old man flowed out, his chain rattling like a sack of keys. He sent ravens to Dragonstone, to Stannis, with the king's letter and a copy in his own hand. He sent others to Winterfell, to White Harbor and Riverrun and the Vale, to men whose honor tasted like iron and not like gold. He had Tomard post guards at his door. He will send food to the watch posts. He had a soft word with Barristan Selmy, who had the look of a man who had seen too many kings rot. The old knight listened with a sorrow that had long since learned endurance. He said he was sworn to the boy who would be king, and he would not yield that oath to a rumor in a book. Ned did not ask him to. He asked him for his patience and his watchful eyes. Through it all, the city breathed around him. His breath came hard and hot. Rumor ran faster than horses. By twilight, the lowest whore on the street of Silk could have told you that the Hand had trapped the queen like a songbird and was teaching the city watch to chirp for him. By the time the lamps were lit, half the dockside was saying the boy with the pretty curls had no right but a mother's lies, and the other half was betting which lord would be killed first when lions and wolves and a stag fought in a cage. Sansa cried when he told her she would not be wed to Joffrey. "He is a prince," she said in a broken way. "He is kind. Sometimes he gave me a lemon cake himself." "You have a forgiving heart," Ned told her, and he bent to kiss her brow. "Lords and princes make their kindnesses like jewels and wear them large. It is the daily thing with a seam turned under you must learn to judge. He will not be king. He was never meant to be." She did not understand. He did not expect her to. He sent Arya to Syrio and told her not to show her tongue to guardsmen. Then he sent guardsmen to sit in the anteroom where Syrio taught and found himself less anxious. At night, he stood at the window again and watched the city burn its own smoke into the stars. There was the sea again, that heavy breathing. It would carry his letters away from the city in the morning. Stannis Baratheon received Ned's raven in the echoing hall of Dragonstone. The castle had been made when the world was younger and still liked monsters. Its stones wanted to suggest scales and claws, and what the wind could not etch time had taught the rock. Stannis read the letter twice. His mouth did not move as he did it. When he finished, he handed the parchment to Maester Cresson. "Lies," said Celis Florent from her chair, her long thin hands worrying the sash at her waist. "A northern wolf's lies. The queen is proud but not a fiend." "Pride makes fiends," Stannis said without heat. Cresson blinked through his milky tears and read the words. He too read the old book that had been copied beneath Casterly Rock before even Cresson was born. "The seed is," he began and looked at Stannis. "We have found this pattern before. My brother was a man who loved everything," Stannis said with a twist of the mouth. "Wine, women, boar, brawls. He loved honor too in his way, but he did not always love the path to it. He would not have named a wolf to stand before the lion without cause. He was rash, but not mad." Davos stood a pace back, his cloak salt-stained and his hands rough as nets. He had been summoned and had come because he had learned long ago when it was wise to sail and when it was wise to drop anchor and listen. "If the boy's no trueborn," he said slowly, picking his words, "and if King Robert's left you protector over the boy until we prove it, there's time to move your pieces without breaking the board. The city is a stew pot, your grace. If you don't take the lid at the right moment, it boils over." "I am not your grace," Stannis said, the words flat and hard as a blade laid on a table. "Not yet. Not while I have only a letter and a book. No, I need to see." I need to stand in the damned city and look at the boy's head with my own eyes. Celis hissed. You risk yourself for gossip. I risk myself because truth does not walk to your door. You have to catch it. And because if Eddard Stark keeps the city from burning until I arrive, it will be a miracle worthy of a Red Priest scroll. Salladhor Saan made a theatrical noise. The Lyseni admiral, currently adrift in Dragonstone's court like a bright fish in cold water, had a gold ring in one ear and a mirthful light in his eye that money only brightened. I like miracles, he said. They are like coin. Most people only believe in them when they are in their own hand. Stannis ignored him as a man ignores a biting gnat while counting more dangerous things. Make ready the fleet, he told Davos. We go to King's Landing. The Stormlands hummed with their own news. Renly Baratheon sat in the shade of a sycamore at morning and tugged a blade of grass until the sweet juice stained his fingers green. Loras Tyrell, lounging like a cat, told him sums of men and wheat and sword points with a quiet relish that did not completely hide his own anxieties. The Reach loves a pageant, Renly said, watching sunlight dance across Loras's hair. They will love a handsome young king. They will love peace. They will love not having iron men and savage Northmen tramping through their wheat. You are handsome and young, Loras said, smiling. One must work with what the gods give. Renly's mouth tilted. If only the gods had given me birth before Robert. If only they had given my brother Jon Arryn alive. If only Cersei in a tower, Stark playing at justice, Stannis with a quill up his arse pretending it's a sword, and Tywin Lannister counting coppers and corpses. It's a fool's mask. Then be the man who stops the music, Loras said. Ride to Highgarden, speak to my father, marry my sister and charm the land itself. Renly looked to the horizon as if he could see King's Landing through 100 miles of air. If Stannis sits in the city with Stark and the Watch at heel, he has the gates and the ravens and the right of things. He needs men. I need a crown. It is a curious arithmetic. Not so curious, Loras said, sitting up. Take the crown. Men come. Rights can be made and unmade with swords. Ask your brother. Renly laughed then, softly. You make it sound so clean, but there's mud. Always mud. And Stark is not a man to roll in it. He will raise up the law like a sword and he will cut some fingers. Let us see how many he cuts and whether the hand bleeds. In the camp beneath the walls of Harrenhal, where the stones saved by dragons still sighed with dragon heat, Tywin Lannister drank his wine without tasting it and read 3 letters at once. One from Cersei with words sharp as fresh broken glass. One from a friend who had been bought, warning that the Watch had been bought more deeply, and by whom. One from his outriders on the Green Fork, telling him Riverrun had sent men to burn Lannister foraging parties as if it were a sport. Your daughter is held, Kevan said quietly when Tywin looked up. And your grandchildren. Tywin's face did not move. It was a face that had learned long since how to hold still while hammers fell. She is not held, he said. She is moved from one room to another. Eddard Stark does not have the stones to harm her. He will not cut throats in the Red Keep. He will not even spill blood in his dreams. He does have the stones to write letters, Kevan said. To Stannis. Stannis will come in a ship with 100 sails and a head full of rights. Tywin's mouth went a fraction thinner. Stannis has few friends and fewer smiles. He will never be loved. Love is how you make men bend without breaking them. He placed the letters precisely on the table and considered the lantern's light through the red wine. We could move on the city. Through the Kingswood? Kevan said. The road would be a blade through our belly. And Stannis at our back by sea if he makes the bay. Tywin's fingers tapped the table. Riverrun. If you cut out a man's heart and show it to him, he will walk where you lead. Eddard Stark thinks he holds me by my blood. He does not. He holds me by public dignity. So, we break his kinsmen. We break Tully and make the wolf choose which pain he wants to look at. Jaime Lannister walked into the tent like a man who had decided to be amused. He was a man who liked to gild boredom with danger. They tell me the Stark wolf remains uncaged, he said, flinging himself into a chair. I was hoping to have him brought to me so we might compare beards. Try not to be murdered by a 16-year-old boy while you plague the Riverlands, Tywin said. Jaime laughed, bright and harsh. If dropping a man in an alley with a broken spear is plague, then yes, I confess. There are still some men stupid enough to ride at me one at a time. I try to teach them not to, but it does not take. Tywin set his cup down. If you are captured, he said, no one will be foolish enough to trade you for your sister and her cubs. I'm more of a lion, Jaime said, but his eyes narrowed a little. Do we move on the city? We move on Riverrun, Tywin said. We will see how much meat Eddard Stark has where he says his honor is. A raven's flight and a day in which the city held its breath as if it had been squeezed by an invisible hand. The watchmen kept their lines and were paid from Ned's purse and Littlefinger's warren. A few Lannister men, who had swaggered with coin and brocade through the tourney weeks, found themselves politely escorted to rooms without windows for a time. The Queen sat in Maegor's holdfast and wrote letters furiously and destroyed half of them in the fire. Joffrey screamed at the Hound until the Hound laughed and left. Pycelle ferried milk of the poppy like a blessing and lamented the cost of herbs. Varys slipped through his secret halls and listened to what the rats were saying. On the second day, Robert Baratheon died. Ned stood in the king's bedchamber and looked down at a body that had once been a brother to him and now was an empty cask with the dregs curling at the bottom. He was bone-tired. The city was a grindstone and his thoughts were all the sharper for it and all the more vulnerable to breaking. He sent for bells. He sent for Septon Ian to say the words. He sent for a sheet and for men who would bear the weight gently. When he came to the door to give orders, he found Barristan Selmy there, his white cloak clean, his lined face calmer than the air in a crypt. "My lord," Barristan said. "Sire," Ned said. He was a great man, badly used by life. Barristan's mouth twitched. "And by himself." "You are kind," Ned said. "I am, Barristan did not finish. "What do you need?" "Your sword between the realm and foolish men," Ned said. "Stand with me when I read the will in the throne room." "I stand with the king," Barristan said mildly. "That is what I ask." They were careful to move the body quietly. The rumor still ran ahead of them like a boy with a stolen pear in his hand. By the time Ned's men were in place, the hall was crowded with small folk and lords and the thin half-light of afternoon. Cersei stood again at the base of the throne with her children, her face carved from a harder white than any statue. The watch formed its wall. Slint's lips moved as if he were counting. Bywater's iron hand clicked once. Ned read the letter again. He read it as if words could nail a storm to a tree. He handed it to Pycelle to read into the air. He had the book set on a table and he read from that too. It was not a trick. It was tedious. It was a cat scratching its stink against a post. The lords grumbled. The small folk fidgeted. The boys by a pillar rolled their eyes and pretended to fence with bits of straw. In the end, the truth stood in the hall. The seed had not followed its own stubborn law in one notable case. Cersei laughed, a single syllable, with all the force of her rage behind it. "Do you smell it?" she said, raising her chin. "Ink and dust and the sour sweat of a northern fool. Is this what my son's head draws from the world? Smears and stories." She turned to the white cloaks. "Seize him, throw him in a cell. I will not have my house smeared by a book. Any man who draws a blade will be named traitor," Ned said, "and he will be treated as one. Name me," she spat. Barristan Selmy moved like a bell tolls, inexorable. He walked to the center of the hall and turned to face not Ned, not Cersei, but the people. He laid his hand on the pommel of his sword and his voice carried without strain. "The king is dead. The hand holds his last will. We will obey it until the realm decides otherwise. That is how a kingdom stands and does not fall off its foundations into the sea." Cersei's mouth went hard. "Old men and their rules," she said. "Rules put crowns on heads without needing axes." "Bah," Riston said. He looked at Ned. He did not smile. "Shall we try to do a decent thing in a city that does not know what that looks like?" Ned had the small council assembled. In that room, the walls felt closer than in the hall. Varys sat like a gentle spider with overlarge eyes. Littlefinger's smile was a light that lasted too long and so did not seem like light at all. Pycelle breathed like a furnace and smelled like herbs and stale feathers. "The letters are sent," Ned said. "Stannis will come. We will hold the city in order until he does. Renly has left the city with his household guard. If he proclaims himself, we will deal with that when it occurs." "Deal with?" Littlefinger murmured, amused. "Such tidy carpentry." "Your carpentry," Ned said, "is of another sort." Littlefinger put his hand to his heart as if Ned had complimented him. "Lord Protector," Pycelle said sadly, "there is the small matter of Harrenhal. Lord Tywin is displeased." "Lord Tywin has been displeased since he was born," Varys murmured. "He came out frowning." "There is no small matter of Harrenhal," Ned said. "There is war in the Riverlands and small folk hanging from trees because a lord decided that was a message men could read. He will be answered in a tongue he cannot pretend to misunderstand. I would call my banners if my banners were not 1,000 miles north. So I will call upon the Lord Commander of the City Watch to see to it that no man in Lannister colors draws a sword in the city, and I will ask Lord Baelish to pay what must be paid to keep every man with a spear honest." Littlefinger chuckled. "Your bluntness," he said, "is a sort of charm. I will do the paying. Varys will do the whispering. The maester will waggle his bells. And what will you do, Lord Stark?" "I will do the remembering," Ned said, "and the obeying." Varys folded his hands until they looked like a dove. "Stannis' fleet sails. My little birds in the skiffs and on the quays tell me he has sent ahead envoys with the news of his coming with a truth that presses like a thumb on a bruise. The city is restless. They will be more so when the sails show like a school of fish in the bay. Then we calm them," Ned said. "Money calms," Littlefinger sang. "Bread calms," Varys said. "Soldiers calm," Pycelle muttered. "Honesty calms," Ned said. And they all looked at him as if he had said he intended to quiet a storm by singing to it. He took a breath. "I will address the city," he said. "In the great September, there were 1,000 ways to die fooling with crowds in King's Landing." Ned had known since he came south that he was not built for the theater of it. But the city had to be told, and not by men hiding behind doors. So he walked into the Seven's house with guards before and behind and Slint's men making a corridor in the press. The Septon, a large, soft man with piety that seemed to sweat out of him rather than burn, made a speech about the gods' wise hands. Ned waited like a man waiting for a fever to break, and when the Septon finished, he stepped forward and spoke to the mass. He kept it simple. He spoke of Robert and his laughter and his hunts and his bad temper that came and went like storms. He spoke of boys on thrones and men who would rather bend law than bend knee. He spoke of paper and seals and oaths that were meant to be harder than steel. He did not say the word incest, not once. He said that the realm would be ruled by the king's will until the king's will could be overturned by truth any man could see. He said that if there was to be blood, it would not be between neighbors with the same dirt under their nails, but between men who thought their names meant they could trample the rules everyone else lived under. He said the king's children were guilty of nothing except being children, and they would be kept safe. He saw distrust, and he saw hope, and he saw boredom and hunger, and he saw the mad zeal that can rise in crowds when they think they smell righteousness like smoke. He saw faces he would never see again and faces that would stand out when he closed his eyes that night. He left with the feeling he had thrown words into a deep well and would not know what had hit the water until much later. Stannis came with black sails and a scowl. His ships entered the Blackwater in a line like a row of flint teeth. The city came to the walls and watched. Horns blew. Seagulls rose like scraps of parchment thrown skyward. The royal fleet, what of it that was manned and already, slid out like a polite host to escort the new guests, and Stannis' ships took their bow and moved without ceremony to anchor. He came ashore with Davos at his shoulder and a handful of knights. His mouth was a fixed line. His eyes did not dart. He did not greet the crowd. He was a man used to being obeyed, but not a man used to being watched. He looked, Then, like a man itching in a new coat, Ned met him in the yard before the Red Keep. They had known each other years ago. There had been a time when he had disliked Stannis for being Robert's shadow, the humorless one. Now, looking at him across a kicked-up yard, he felt an odd kinship for the man whose bones were made of duty. Lord Protector, Stannis said. He said the title as if it were a stone he would move aside soon. Lord Stannis, Ned said. I am glad you came. Gladness is not something I do, Stannis said. I came because it is right and because there is a throne being treated as a chair for a family squabble. Where is the boy? In Maegor's Holdfast, Ned said. With his mother and siblings. Stannis' jaw moved as if chewing stone. Barricade a lie where the dragons used to sleep, he said. Fitting. We will hold court in the throne room. Bring the book. Bring the maester. Bring the city. I will not be king because Eddard Stark says so, no more than I will be king because Cersei Lannister says not. I will be king because we put truth up where everyone can see it and dare it to. Speak. They held court. The hall looked different with Stannis in it. Robert had filled space with his laugh, his body, his heat. Stannis emptied it with the weight of his silence. He called witnesses. He called Pycelle and made him read. He called the White Cloaks, and Selmy stepped forward and told the truth as he had learned to hear it. That the king had left a will, that the hand had acted according to it, that oaths were not laces to be untied when a man tired of them. He called the Hound, who shrugged and said he didn't know anything about seed and truth and books. He knew a prince when he saw one, and any boy could be a prince if his mother said so loudly enough. He called the goldsmiths and the armorer who had made the helmets for the prince's hair to tumble out of. He called no one who could truly tell whether a bed had been shared by the wrong legs, because no one would say that in public, and Ned was not willing to drag a dozen small folk girls through a questioner's fire. The court was a performance and a lesson. It ended with a silence. Then what do you say? Stannis asked the hall. Do you want a realm where law is a cape that fits differently on different shoulders? Or do you want one where it covers us all, even the ones who find it an ugly garment? The hall did not know how to answer. The people muttered. The lords looked at each other for cues. The air felt like iron being worked, heated, hammered, cooling unevenly. It was Barristan Selmy who did the thing that took the air and gave it direction. He walked forward in his white cloak until he stood where a man kneels. He was too old to kneel easily, but he did. He put his hands to his sword and said, I served your brother. I will serve you, not because I like you, because this is right. Ned bowed his head. The law works when men decide not to break it. That day, a knot of men decided. It was just enough. Cersei did not scream. She watched from a balcony as a fine spiderweb of legal phrases was spun over the city, and she knew exactly where the strands would break. She smiled the way a man smiles while sharpening a knife. She was escorted back to Maegor's Holdfast, and she began the work of letters again. Not to lords, to sellswords, to priests whose gods preferred bonfires to either truth or lies, to men who knew how to make doors open from the inside. She spoke softly to her children and taught them once again how to use tears as tools. She called in a certain alchemist and had a long talk with him about green things that burned in water and oil and flesh. She put her ringed thumbs into the eyes of the city like a mother drawing tears from a baby, and she meant to make it cry herself free. Renly crowned himself in the Stormlands. He did so in a field of banners that smelled of sweet crushed grass and horse. The Reach sent him smiles. He put a crown on his own head and found that it was lighter than he had feared. It made him taller. It made him beloved. It made him make promises like falling petals. He marched north with a garden at his heels. Riverlands burned. Tywin took a town and left only a well and a story. Edmure Tully beat him at a ford and then lost 2 men for everyone he hurt. Catelyn Stark rode between camps with the dust of fear caking her throat, speaking to brother, to uncle, to any lord who would listen. She had left King's Landing with an ache in her shoulders, and it had not lifted. It grew heavier like armor. She wanted her husband. She wanted to count her children and find all their faces. She wanted to be anywhere but where she was. She did what women always did in that realm, kept going. Tyrion Lannister strode into his father's camp at dawn after Bronn Steel had won him freedom in a different smoky hall and found that the world had shifted a foot to the left. Cersei was penned, Joffrey was not a king but still a prince with a head attached. Stannis had come down from his bleak rock and claimed the throne as if it were a duty rather than a feast, and Eddard Stark was not a head on a spike but a man with guards who nodded to no lions. "Well," Tyrion said, looking at the map, "that's interesting." Tywin glanced at him as if at a dog that had learned a new trick. "You will go to the city," he said. Tyrion blinked. "The city? You will do what you do," Tywin said. "You will make words into coins and coins into men, and you will hold as much ground as your tongue can buy until I can cut it from under you. Take the river road and stay out of sight. You have a talent for the gutter. Use it." "Such paternal warmth," Tyrion said. "I weep. Dry your eyes on your wits," Tywin said, and dismissed him with a hand. Tyrion rode with a small company and Bronn's easy grin. He entered King's Landing through a postern gate and found a city unusually sober. The watchmen stood with spears grounded and did not look like men wondering where their next purse would come from. They looked like men wondering who might try to buy them next and whether their captain would hang them if they took the coin. He made his way to the Tower of the Hand with a blend of swagger and sidle and announced himself to a northern guard as the brother of the king, if there were a king to be brother to. Ned received him with a face like a closed door. "You are welcome, so long as you do not presume to give orders," he said. "So long as you keep your men in hand. So long as you understand there is law here now, not lions." "You've done a difficult thing, Lord Stark," Tyrion said, looking around. "The city hasn't looked so neat since it had dragons." "You will be treated as befits your name," Ned said. "Joffrey and his brother and sister are safe." Tyrion said. "Well, it is something when a Lannister must thank a Stark for keeping Lannister children alive." "You owe me no thanks," Ned said. "I said must, not will," Tyrion replied, smiling. "Where is my sister?" "In a tower," Ned said. "Writing letters. God save us," Tyrion sighed. "Then the city is already afire, only we haven't noticed the smoke yet." And so it was. Letters scuttle like cockroaches. Gold crawls under doors. The alchemists found their fun again. The old, thick green liquid sitting under cobwebs in their vaults sloshed, was stirred, was woken. They fed it with dreams of burning ships and men screaming in water that caught fire. Cersei found in wildfire a metaphor for her own heart. She whispered to it and it licked its bright lips. Ned learned, on a certain chill night, that Slynt had been approached by a man with soft hands and a soft voice offering twice what Stark had paid. Slynt had taken the money and given the man ale and smiled as he might at a wench and then given the purse to Bywater to drop into a privy. He told Ned himself with a pride that was hard to stomach. "I'm a loyal man when it pays," Slynt said. "This pays." "Loyal to coin," Ned said, tired. "Loyal to the city that feeds me," Slynt said. "Because your coin buys me that city. And because Bywater will hang me if I take another man's." Bywater did not smile. "He would," he said. Ned removed Slynt from command 2 weeks later anyway, when Stannis insisted and when he learned Slynt had quietly placed 3 cousins as petty captains and a brother-in-law as paymaster. He gave Slynt a choice between a black cloak or a black cell. Slynt chose the wall with sneers about snow in his teeth. "I'll be lord of something up there," he boasted to Bywater on his last morning, and Bywater said nothing. They made Jacelyn Bywater Lord Commander. The watch stood in their lines as if someone had beaten them into new shape on an anvil while they slept. Tyrion watched it happen and rubbed his sharp chin and thought about the geometry of men. He set watchers on the alchemists and watchers on the watchers and enjoyed himself in his small way, because if he had to be alive in this city, he would at least have interesting things to count. Stannis ruled. Ruled is the word. He did not reign. Reigning was what Robert had done, burning bright and then guttering. Ruling was a long, grim arithmetic. He held court 2 days in 7 and drilled counts and balances the other days. Spoke to guildsmen in a voice which they recognized as the voice of a man who had cut sailcloth in rain and didn't see why the rain ought to be brought into the argument. He had Davos sit near him and speak plain when others grew flowery. He made Barristan his lord commander of the Kingsguard and required him to eat in the barracks with the young knights to teach them that grand oaths were bricks only when laid on a bed of small daily stones. He treated Cersei with a coldness that could have chilled iron. He spoke to Joffrey as he would to a very rude page, and to Tommen as he would to a child who might grow into a decent man if the adults around him could ever stop preening. He told Myrcella that she must be married for the realm's sake someday, and she looked at him with a steady mouth and said she understood. Cersei's eyes gleamed when she looked at Stannis. If Stannis had been made of oil and she had held a spark, the court would have gone up in a beautiful fire. The fire came from the river instead. Tywin Lannister did not come to the city. He smashed a Tully host and took 2 castles that had thought themselves too small to be noticed. He executed a lord who had invited him to parley under a guest right that seemed to shift political in the way some doors shift in a draft. He wrote a letter to Stannis that did not mention Cersei and that did not say the word king in any place that connected to the name Stannis, and he asked for a truce to consider winter. Stannis read it and snorted. He thinks me weak because I do not send heads back and forth with my replies. Send him a head, Davos suggested. One he will not like to see. No, Stannis said. We will send him a ford he cannot cross. They laid a chain across the Blackwater, a chain that had been drawn up from mold and polish and old, half-remembered nightmares. The metal links were hauled up from cellars where mad kings had kept their toys and hungry ones had sold them to armorsmiths one piece at a time. Tyrion oversaw the work with a boy's delight and a cynic's plan for how to use it when the court that had hired him forgot to ask him what he was doing. Stannis watched the chain be fed across the river's mouth and did not indulge in delight. He indulged in the satisfaction of seeing a question he had asked be answered with iron. Wildfire casks, green and ancient, slept under cloth. The alchemists whispered like undertakers at a good harvest. Cersei smiled into her mirror and dabbed scent at her wrists. Renly came within sight of the city at last with a host that looked like a parade. Men in bright surcoats and banners in a wash of green and gold and rose. Knights laughing as if they were at a tourney. He sent a herald. My lord brother will not be received here if he calls himself king, Stannis said. He calls himself king, said the herald, his hat quivering. Then he will not be received, Stannis said, and turned away to tell a shipwright that his anchor chains were too weak and that he should not waste words arguing. Ned went to the wall to look down at the colored field that was Renly's camp and felt the weariness behind his knee bones. He would have given something he could not name to be back at Winterfell with the smell of pine and earth and clean cold on the air. His boys chasing each other with sticks through the yard and his girls arguing over whether a line of blue thread had gone straight enough. He went down while the sun was lowering and asked Renly to meet him halfway. Renly came smiling. You and Stannis make a fine pair, he said, not entirely cruel. You make a fine picture, Ned said, not entirely kind. Renly spread his hands. Come with me, he said. Bring your north. We will ride to Highgarden, and when we return we will be so beloved that no one will even remember how to rebel. You name yourself king, Ned said. The law is the stick stories are carved upon, Renly said. I will write a better story. It is not only story, Ned said. It's the difference between a man's house being his and a man's house being yours because you like his wife. Renly laughed. Don't scowl, Ned. You always scowled at me when I teased. You make duty look like a hard bed. I cannot sleep on it. He sobered. Listen, I know you dislike me, but you can like what I bring. Harvests untrampled, roads full of trade and not soldiers, an end to Lannister arrogance. Stannis cannot make men love him. He can make them obey, and if you hold a man's obedience too tightly, he turns blue in the face. I cannot betray what I said out loud in front of gods and men, Ned said. I cannot break the law with such brightness and call it good because it shines. Renly looked at him as if he were a clever dog that had learned the wrong trick. Then we are enemies, he said, and the surprise in the word made it almost gentle. No, Ned said. We are foolish men who have chosen different roads. Renly left with a bow, and the camp below moved like a sea. Ned made his way back and felt the weight of choices like armor. In the end, It was Cersei's plot that opened the door to the worst of it. A cask of wildfire on a barge, to be drifted down to the chain and set alight with the rest of the bay to make panic and to cover an attempt at escape. A paid knight's kindness to a gate guard's wife so a particular gate might swing open at a particular hour. A whisper to a particular cell's word that a particular boy, golden and violent, would prefer to die in sudden bright heroism than sit quietly behind a wall while men argued over him like old women over a trout. Tyrion found the cask. He found the gate. He found the boy alone on a parapet, hugging his anger like a lover, before Joffrey could tip the city into a panic. He stood between the boy and the drop with a smile that had often got him out of kicks and a name that had sometimes brought him into worse. "What are you doing?" Joffrey spat. "Keeping your pretty head on your pretty shoulders," Tyrion said. "You're not a king yet, and the thing about kings is, they have to be alive to be crowned. Die now and you'll only be a story. Most stories bore me." Joffrey made a wild motion, and for one moment Tyrion saw Jaime's grin made crueler and more careless by lack of practice. He crossed the space between them and hit the boy, open-handed, a crack that echoed. Tyrion was very used to striking up. He saw the boy's eyes go shocked and wide and then brim with furious tears that would in 2 years be the tears of a man who killed for the pleasure of watching a head roll. He saw a future he did not want. He took the boy by the collar and marched him indoors. The hounds saw them and laughed and followed, and that was that. The cask sank, the gate stayed shut. Cersei screamed like a kettle at Tyrion, and he bowed and said he was only saving what she had made, and the city was left with no bright disaster. For the moment, the chain worked when Tywin Lannister at last decided to test the city. He did it the way he did everything, with preparation and with disdain for the fact that the people he crushed might not enjoy their part in his geometry. He sent 50 ships, hired and bullied, down from Duskendale with red-painted shields. He sent men around through the Kingswood to set a fire on a slope to make smoke and draw eyes. He arranged a rumor that Renly would attack the city walls while Stannis watched from the ramparts with his hand in his breeches. The ships came like teeth. The chain rose from the water like a sea serpent. The ships that had come close were trapped. The ones still far off turned in fear and then stopped in their turn when the green fire bloomed on the water like a garden finally given light. It was too bright. Men screamed. The chain glowed in links. The captains who kept their heads turned their ships by inches through water that behaved like oil. The Blackwater moaned to itself for days after. "Magnificent," said Tyrion, and then vomited. He wiped his mouth and said, "I would marry whoever thought of that chain if I liked chains." "The idea is an old one," Stannis said. "We only had to raise it and burn men with it." He looked at the bay and did not smile. "I will not do it again unless I have to." "It's not a trick the gods let you play twice," Davos said. The battle broke Tywin's taste for testing the walls. He drew back like a man touching hot iron and went south to salt his pride with easier victories. Renly marched to the Trident and played at king with lords who wanted to be seen beside his smile. The city kept breathing. The Watch kept its lines. The small council bickered about coin while Littlefinger arranged quietly to make debt look like a game that could be won with more play. And Varys made his small squeaking noises and wrote to places across the water that would one day care deeply what had happened here. Eddard Stark wrote to Winterfell at night with clean ink and an unsteady hand. He told Robb to keep the North whole and to keep it out of southern mouths. He told Bran to learn to be patient and careful with horses and with men. He told his wife, writing to a moving camp, that he loved her and that he was sorry he had ever brought her south. Sorry he had brought their daughters here to learn the ways of a place where your shadow could trip you and you would be mocked for falling. He walked the corridors in the morning and trained his men in a cramped yard and learned to drink wine without tasting it. He went to see Arya at her dancing and found her cutting at shadows with a grin. The Braavosi master bowed to him with exquisite irony. "She is quick," Syrio said. "Too quick," Ned said. But he could not keep the pride from his voice. "Teach her to be quick enough to run away." "I teach her to run at her enemy," Syrio said, eyes shining. "But only when the enemy is afraid in his head. If he is not afraid, we move as the water moves. Around." Sansa stitched and learned to listen without trusting and to smile without promising. She visited the sept and learned to pray as if the gods were a court you could petition if your petition was beautiful enough. She saw Joffrey once at a distance and her heart hurt in a way that had become familiar, like a scar running under whether you had learned to predict. Cersei watched through her lattices and through spies' eyes and learned that Stannis could not be charmed and Ned could not be bought, and that between the two of them her pride would never recover. She wrote to her father and he wrote back that patience was a meat only strong jaws could chew. She sharpened her sons and waited.
Jaime Rode.
He killed a man who had begged prettily and another who had cursed him elegantly and a third who had tried to sing his own family ballad while dying. He laughed and rolled his shoulder and felt the weight of his mail shirt like a friend he had grown tired of. He dreamed sometimes of a hall of kings where swords were melted and a chair was made and no one could say it had been a good idea. Tyrion built a life out of snags and smiles. He ate with Davos and found in the smuggler something like a mirror, if a mirror could be set upon a barrel and argue. He slept with a woman who was not Shay and reminded himself every morning that he could leave a bed without leaving a piece of himself behind if he only learned where his pieces were. He went to the sept sometimes and once, standing in a corner while the fat septon mumbled. He prayed for a thing that surprised him, that he could get his family out of this with their souls intact. He did not believe in souls. He prayed anyway. And in the free cities, across the water, a girl with silver hair learned to say the word dragon without flinching. And when she dreamed of a red door and a house that smelled of lemon. When she woke, she tasted ash and something sweet. The year went on. There were fewer deaths in the streets than there might have been. It was not peace. Peace is not a thing you can find in a box. It was a kind of order that a man might feed his children in. Stannis was crowned under a sky that could not decide whether it wanted to rain or clear. The crown was heavy and ugly and honest. It did not flatter him. It suited him in the way a tool suits a man who takes care of it. Barristan stood to one side like a white rock. Ned stood to the other like a piece of the north that had chosen to live here. The small folk cheered because cheering was safer than keeping quiet, and because Davos had made sure there were carts of good bread and pork pasties in the streets afterward. Loras Tyrell declared Renly the only king worth a salad crown and stormed off to fight a battle that had not yet been chosen for him. Tywin took another town, Riverrun held. With the crown came a harder law. Stannis had men whipped for theft who would, under Robert, have lost only a finger from grabbing a soldier's patience. He fined 3 guilds heavily for cheating on iron weights. He had a lord's son put to the sword when that boy, drunk and stupid, killed a watchman with a dagger to prove his courage. He spoke to the father in his hall the next day, and the lord who had gone white with rage went whiter still when Stannis told him he should thank his king for treating him no better than any butcher's son. The city grumbled. It also slept more safely. Ned did not love Stannis. He respected him. Respect is a colder thing, but it lasts longer. They spoke often, and their words were like stones laid side by side to make a road, not like flowers thrown at each other's feet. They disagreed the way slow rivers pull on each other's banks. They kept the city. Tywin sent a man under a white flag to ask for Cersei and the children. He promised nothing. He offered something called honor. Stannis said no. Ned said no. Cersei listened at a door she had ordered built with a key only she owned and laughed to herself afterward until something broke inside. When winter brushed its first long finger down the neck, a raven came to the Red Keep with a message blacker than its feathers. Benjen Stark was missing still. The dead walked sometimes where the ground was white and the wind sounded like wildness itself. Ned took the letter to Stannis and watched the king's face fail to change. "There is always a story up there," Stannis said. "Wolves and snows and shadows." "There is truth," Ned said. "Then send men without banners," Stannis said. Quietly, "I cannot send a king's snows while I hold a lion by the tail." Ned went out later to the Godswood that had once been a castle garden. The southern weirwood there had been cut down long ago, and the gods were only represented by a pond and a willow that had learned how to whisper under another name. He knelt and pressed his palm to the damp earth and closed his eyes. He asked for strength without commemorations. He stood, and when he did, Arya dropped from the willow like some stalking cat and planted herself before him. "Don't send me away," she said. "Who has been telling you I would?" he asked, though he could guess and the guess made him tired. Everyone, she said. Sansa says the north is safer, but I don't want safe. You want to be live, Ned said, dry. She scowled at him with love. Don't make me a lady. I couldn't, child, he said and kissed her brow. Sansa watched from a distance and saw her father's hand on Arya's hair and felt something bloom and wither in her at the same time. She wondered if she would ever stop feeling that way, if there was a way to be in a place without being torn in half by it. Ned wrote to the wall anyway. He arranged coin quietly and spoke to men who knew roads that did not appear on maps. He asked Varys to find him 8 shadows that moved well in snow. Varys nodded and opened a drawer in a place where, if anyone had asked, he would have sworn he did not keep drawers. Renly and Stannis finally met on a flat meadow long enough for 1,000 men to die upon. They did not that day. They spoke. They did not agree. Stannis would not apologize for truth. Renly would not apologize for charm. The grass listened. A hare watched. Men died later on that same meadow when someone forgot to be clever and someone else decided to be brave when the wind was wrong. The war did not end. It lessened, because 2 men had made their arguments and found them equal in vanity. Renly took his garden and went south. Stannis went to court and rolled his eyes at guild petitions and hung a man who had dressed in new faiths to hide his old sins. Ned made bread happen when coin ran thin. Tyrion made jokes because if he did not, he would think about men he had not saved. Cersei escaped once. She bribed a maid who had not eaten enough meat as a child and found well water that had run through old iron pipes and tasted of rust and blood. She got as far as the yard before a line of watchmen lowered their pikes, and their pike heads were as one like geese flying, and she laughed and went back inside. Later she tried to kill herself in a small, theatrical way that would have made the city cry if she'd succeeded. A guard kicked the stool away and hauled her down, and she spat at him and he bowed. Stannis had her child taken from her for a month and then returned, not as a punishment to the child but as a lesson to the mother. She learned nothing. People like her rarely did. Tyrion sat with Cersei one evening when the light was wine and the tower's stones exhaled the day's heat. "Do you remember?" he said. "The time you hid in the cellars at Casterly Rock, and we all thought you drowned in the cistern until you came up with your hair smelling like fish?" Cersei turned her fine head and looked at him as if he were a dish that had been set before her when she had asked for something else. "You were always a jester," she said. "If you were taller, you would have been more dangerous. Your height makes people careless." "I am dangerous enough," Tyrion said pleasantly. "Don't kill yourself. It will give them poetry." She laughed sourly and looked away. "What will you do?" she asked after a while. "When all this is over and they make us all into a comedy to be acted at Mummers Plays." "Live," Tyrion said. "It is the only revenge." Tywin died of a fever 2 years later in a far different timeline than the one that could have been. He had overreached the same way even careful men do when their caution becomes a habit rather than a practice. Jaime died not at Riverrun but on a muddy road near the Green Fork. Not in a duel but in a chaos of arrows and a slipped saddle. He fell with his hair full of wildflowers and his mouth open in shock that he should die like any man. Cersei never knew for certain the hour until much later, and when she did she shrieked like a broken kettle. Renly married Margaery Tyrell and was happy for a while in a way that made men kind around him and careless with their knives. Stannis reigned, not like Robert, no. He reigned by reminding everyone daily that there was a way a thing should be done and it had not been done yet, and he meant to see it done if he had to drag them all backwards through stinging nettles. The city was tight and fretful and safer than before. He mothered the realm like a crab tends its eggs. Eddard Stark became old in a southern way. By trade. He traded. He watched other men's sons and learned which of them he could trust to carry small hard things without dropping them. He dreamed sometimes still of snow fields at night that swallowed sound, and he woke and lay with eyes open until dawn grayed the sky and the sea breathed in and out and in again. The city watch wore their gold cloaks and kept their lines and learned, slowly, what they had not always known. That they were meant not to be a cudgel for lords but a hand that held the city steady. Bywater walked a little stooped from a wound taken in a brawl he broke up on the Street of Flower. His iron hand clicked and children ran after him sometimes, laughing and imitating the sound. Janos Slint froze sooner than he had boasted on the wall, and he did not become a lord of anything but his own grudge, which was large enough to warm him for a while. His son made a life in the kitchens and learned that a pot of stew, when not spilled, can feed more men than a purse of gold when scattered. He said this to no one who mattered, and so it remained a small truth, and therefore true. Salador San grew richer and fatter and sang bawdy songs about kings and chains. Davos became a hand of a king in everything but the name, and it made him as uncomfortable as being made to sit in velvet breeches. He wrote to his sons and told them things he had not learned from any maester. Varys watched and smiled when it was safe and did not smile when it was not. He supposed his enemies, that is, anyone who thought the world should be the size of their own satisfaction, had not been defeated, merely delayed. He sent little birds out into the world. He fed them crumbs that sometimes were coins and sometimes were kindnesses. He thought of dragons and of boys who had never yet told a lie and of how rare that combination was. He waited like a gardener waits for rain or for fire. The realm did not forget what had almost happened. Songs were written and then new ones. In a tavern near the river, a man with a scar down his face sang of a day when iron had been bought with gold and used to keep a city from cutting its own throat. He sang it as if it were a funny story with only a small sadness. People liked it because it ended without a head falling from a bridge, and such endings make good nights. There were other songs with other endings, and those had their crowds too. Time is the only king that rules without a throne. Took some things and left others. It left, in the long, slow ruts of days, an uncertain blessing. Boys who would grow to shed their pride more easily than their blood, girls who would grow to see a choice farther down the road before they came to it, old men who had learned to keep blunt swords sharp out of habit, and one northern lord who had learned how to pay for a necessary evil without selling his soul. In the quiet of a certain morning, with the sea's breath in at the window and the city's stink making its low, complicated song, Eddard Stark stood once more in a tower that felt far from home and watched gulls argue over a fish. The gulls were shameless and loud. They never asked whether the fish had wanted to live. He watched them and he smiled, not because there was less dirt in the world for all he had done, but because for a while there might be less blood in it. He turned from the window. His boots left clean marks on the floor where the servants had not yet come with their brooms. He had letters to write. He had men to meet. He had a city to keep from dying of its own heat. He had daughters to speak to. He had a king to remind and to contradict. He set his jaw like a man going out into snow and went to his day.